Hey guys, Dr. Blackman here with Female Reproductive System. Please follow along in your lab student handout so you will know what you're responsible for. Okay. These structures that we've already covered because they're part of the endocrine system, because they make progesterone and estrogen, which are hormones, those are the ovaries. So there's one ovary there, and there's one ovary there. They're yellow in this model, okay? The ovaries produce oocytes, or eggs, that can potentially be fertilized to make an embryo, which then becomes a fetus, which then becomes a baby, okay? These structures here, these projections from the fallopian tube, they're kind of like finger-like projections. They're called fimbriae, okay? F-I-M-B-R-I-A-E, fimbriae. And what they do is they sort of beat in a coordinated fashion so that when the ovary releases an egg in a process called ovulation, the fimbriae will sort of grab onto that egg and move it into this structure where fertilization generally occurs, okay? The structure there where fertilization usually occurs, it has three names, okay? Most commonly called the fallopian tube, but also sometimes called the uterine tube, also sometimes called the oviduct, okay? So any of those three names are correct. This part of the fallopian tube, it sort of flares out and gets larger before you get to the fimbriae. That part of the fallopian tube is called the infundibulum, okay? The fallopian tube will then take the egg, which may be fertilized at that point, right? That embryo then is going to travel to the womb here and implant, right? So that's the uterus. Okay, now I'm going to take this off so we can see the structures underneath it better. Okay, so again, here's the uterus, right? The womb. Okay, you need to know the three different layers of the uterus, okay? The inner lining of the uterus is called the endometrium, okay? That's this reddish area here. That's the part that changes over the course of that month, and it sheds off in a process called menses if fertilization and implantation haven't occurred, right? If there's not a pregnancy, that endometrium sloughs off, okay? This thick layer here, which is made of smooth muscle that contracts to push that baby out when it's time, right? That's called the myometrium. Remember, myo means muscle. And then this thin part on the outside is the perimetrium. Perimetrium, thin, basically just a layer that surrounds and protects. So endo, myo, perimetrium, going from inside out, okay? You also need to know the different regions of the uterus. This portion here, which is the neck of the uterus, okay? It's very important clinically. That's called the cervix. Okay, why is the cervix important? Number one, it's the opening of the uterus, so that cervix has to completely dilate for that baby to come out during childbirth. The other reason is cancer is not uncommon in the cervix, and you can easily screen for that by doing a pap smear, where you insert a wooden speculum, sort of take some of the cells from the cervix and look for changes that might be indicative of cervical cancer. So the lower 1/3 is called the cervix. The other portion, this upper 2/3, is called the body. And then this portion here at the top, that's the fundus, okay? I know body and fundus are not in the lab student handouts, but just wanted to mention those two structures. This birth canal here, right, this fibromuscular tube, as your textbook describes it, that's the vagina or vaginal canal, okay? The opening of the vagina is the vaginal orifice, okay? An orifice is just an opening, typically, okay? So this is the urinary bladder, right, which we studied since it's part of the urinary system. And there's the urethra, and there's the urethral orifice. Now, the reason we mention this is because the opening of the urethra and the vagina are very close together, okay? And a couple of other structures that we need to be aware of. These external structures here that sort of make up the external genitalia. There's the labia majora, right, major, and then the labia minora, minor, okay? And labia, the derivative of that is lip, okay? There's actually, it's actually a lot easier to describe those structures in a different picture that I'll show in a different video. This portion here, lots of sensory receptors. It's homologous to the glans penis. That's called the clitoris, okay? This portion here, which provides sort of insulation and protection for the structures underneath, that's called the mons pubis, which translates to pubic mound, okay? This structure here, blue, that's called the symphysis pubis or pubic symphysis. Excuse me. It's made of cartilage. It becomes very lax during childbirth so that those two hip bones where they come together in front can separate a little bit to allow more room for that baby's head and shoulders to be able to go through the birth canal, okay? One of the things I wanted to mention, these external structures here that include labia minora, labia majora, clitoris, etc., right? These external genitals, as a group, they're collectively known as the vulva, V-U-L-V-A, right? If you're curious too, so urethral orifice here, vaginal orifice here, and then the anus here, the opening to the digestive system.